So, very, very warm welcome to the fifth of five at the moment online roundtables as part of the Sussex and the City project. The purpose of these roundtables is to have sort of informal but lively conversations around kind of an economic theme that is coming up a lot in early conversations around devolution in Sussex and Brighton. So we have had a look at sort of small business growth. We've looked at land, sea and environment and conversations around planning. We've looked at arts and culture. We've looked at digital and tech. And in this session, we're going to be looking at manufacturing, advanced engineering, making, which is such an intrinsic part of the Sussex story, but one that's not always fully understood or fully kind of recognised as a big part of our potential sort of growth. So really delighted as always to be joined live by a handful of regional experts, all bringing all sorts of different perspectives and insight to the chat. But also, this is a resource that is being recorded and will be shared with the ever-growing, very rapidly and fast and exploding community that is joining us on this strange journey for Sussex and the City as Sussex and Brighton moves towards becoming a strategic mayoral authority with the first elections for a mayor in May 2026. Still way more questions than answers, and I don't think there's anyone that would disagree with that. But what's starting to emerge are trends and themes and points of interest where opportunity might lie as certainly some of the technical process becomes a bit clearer about what's going to happen, but also some of the learning from other combined mayoral authorities, and I will talk about a couple of those today. But as the conversation gets deeper and richer and more people join in, there's some really exciting things emerging. So thank you to everyone who's been on the journey so far. So how these worked, for those of you that's not joined one of these before, I'm going to give a very, very, very brief sort of overview of Sussex and City and what we're trying to do. And then we've got three themes that we're going to have a look at to do with manufacturing. So I'll introduce those in a minute. And then I give a little bit of context about just some of the background, some of the data, some of the statistics, things that we might be cognizant of when we're thinking about this topic. But then it really is a live and lively conversation with our guests who all bring all sorts of different perspectives. We're absolutely delighted to be partnering on this event with Creston Reeves, the accountancy firm, and one of their partners, Che, is joining us. I'm going to introduce him in a moment to give a few words about what Creston Reeves has been up to. After I've just reminded everybody of the Sussex and the City programme from scratch, because I know a lot of people are coming to this new. So very quickly, what we're doing is a big conversation about devolution as it happens, trying to speak in human and trying to bring as many people on the journey as we can as we navigate this. So our weekly podcasts are worth checking out, come out every Monday. We've got such lovely feedback and a real growing audience for this. So, we've got some brilliant guests lined up. So do subscribe to that via the Sussex and the City.info website. And you can also subscribe to our real-time bulletins that come out every other day or so, which are little pithy, no longer than a kind of 2 or 3 minute read about what's changing, what's happening. Just this morning's, for example, introduced to a whole new batch of people that are putting their names forward to become the mayoral candidate for their political party. So if you're interested in starting to learn who might become mayor and who's interested, then do subscribe to our newsletter. And the roundtables, well, you're at one, and this is the last of the current batch, so I won't talk about those because if you're here, so there we are, and I've explained what we're trying to do. But what's key is the Sussex and the City 100, which is a coalition of businesses, organisations, charities from across Sussex, East, West, and Brighton and Hove, who are investing in this project. Whether it's through sponsorship, whether it's through resources, communications, tech, And we're really, really proud of the partnerships that are developing through this. This is not our project. We're just doing the grunt work. This is really a coalition of people that are interested in the future of Sussex. If you want to become part of the Sussex and the City 100, do get in touch. Okay, enough of me waffling on about that. So what we're going to look at today is manufacturing. And I'm going to, as I promised, introduce Che Took, partner at Preston Reeves, to talk a little bit about and to set the scene a little bit from their perspective about why this is an important part of Sussex growth story. Che, over to you.
Thank you, Richard. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Che Took, and I'm a partner with Creston Reeves. We're delighted to be working with Sussex and the City as our county starts its devolution journey. I'm also Vice President of Worthing and Ada Chamber of Commerce, so can see it from more than one side. Creston Reeves, though, is a leading UK accountancy and advisory firm. We've offices across Sussex, in Brighton, Chichester and Horsham, as well as in Kent and London. We employ over 500 professionals and serve a diverse client base ranging from dynamic businesses and not-for-profits to private individuals and families. It's a true reflection of our county. As a B Corp certified organisation, we're committed to high standards of social and environmental performance, transparency and accountability. This values-led approach is reflected in our advisory services, which aim to align profitability with purpose. We provide a comprehensive suite of services, including accounts, audit and assurance, tax advisory and compliance, and outsourcing, including payroll. We've developed specialist expertise and are now seeing real growth in areas such as ESG and sustainability. Our newly launched ESG advisory and reporting service helps businesses and particularly manufacturers embed sustainability into strategy and operations. There's also corporate finance, supporting growth through acquisitions and capital raising, and innovation and R&D, where we advise on R&D tax credits and innovation funding. As a member of Creston Global, we also offer international support through a network of independent accounting firms. Creston Reeves' purpose is to guide clients, colleagues, and communities to a brighter future. We focus on understanding client needs, anticipating future challenges, and delivering personalised, proactive advice that drives positive impact across the South East and beyond. We're keen to work together with all stakeholders across Sussex and look forward to today's discussion. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Che. Fantastic. Yeah, it's such a privilege to be working with such leadership as that from Creston Reeves, and a number of professional services firms. People will have spotted, other accountancy firms, legal firms that are really showing up and getting behind this project. Understanding not just what it means for their clients, but also for the whole region. And I think that's such a testament to the strength and confidence of professional service in the region. So thanks so much, Che. So what we're going to be talking about today, three sections, as I sort of hinted. One is a bit around sort of industrial growth, a little bit of conversation maybe about regulation and the sort of use of land. I know that's a real hot topic at the moment, and many feel that the narrative Sussex can never be a big manufacturing base just simply because of the topography and the way the sea, the downs, and everything else sort of hems us in. But maybe there's opportunities to think a little bit differently about that. We're also going to think about the micro and specialist manufacturers that really are a big spine through the Sussex economy. Over 3,000 micro manufacturers, whether it's food and drink or widgets and bits and pieces that, as part of supply chains, often gets overlooked as a real strength of Sussex. So we're going to have a chat about that. And innovation, research, and industrial futures. The industrial strategy came out a couple of weeks ago. Very, very keen to putting renewable energy, putting green tech, putting manufacturing, defence, and future technologies right at the heart of where the UK government is certainly putting its energy and where is expecting private investment to come from. So thinking about what that means for Sussex through a manufacturing lens is something that we want to make easy for any future mayor to tell that story. So we're going to start with this, thinking about industry and some of the regulatory challenges, opportunities. So a little bit of context about, what's the Sussex picture at the moment in terms of this. So, manufacturing engineering counts for 7.7% of all jobs in Sussex, well, certainly all job vacancies. Now, a lot of those aren't getting filled. That's a different story, and I hope maybe to bring Mel in a little bit later if she wants to chat about from a skills perspective. Um, but actually, it's one of the better paid sectors within the region. Certainly a region that's heavily reliant on things like hospitality and retail that are traditionally lower paid. Manufacturing is where some of those more high growth career opportunities are. And Worthing, Che, you said maybe this is all down to you being on vice president of the Chamber of Commerce, but Worthing consistently shows up as one of the UK's most productive towns, largely because of its manufacturing base. So a lot of the employment manufacturing is concentrated in West Sussex. So I'm delighted that we've got Dick Shone on the call today, who I'm going to bring in a little while, very much representing manufacturing in East Sussex. But it's a bigger slice of the West Sussex jobs base than it is than in East Sussex. But we see that as plenty of room for growth. The industrial floor space has actually expanded by quite a lot in the last decade or so, up 55,000 meters squared, where commercial real estate has actually come down. So thinking about where companies are situated and where that opportunity is for expansion is quite an important part of this conversation. And we know that in the list of high growth businesses from across Sussex, manufacturers are represented very strongly, from aerospace and defence to consumer electronics, engines and automotive. We have some real pioneers within their sectors based within the county and not always recognised and celebrated for that. However, we know that space is a real issue. We know that regulatory concerns, particularly around water neutrality and the lack of, a reservoir capacity to be able to build lots of new industrial parks, etc. That's been calculated at maybe holding back 10,000 new jobs in the area of manufacturing alone. And we know that we have some big challenges around jobs and employment in parts of East Sussex. And I'm going to read shortly, a little bit later, a rather provocative statement from an East Sussex-based manufacturer who is quite cross about some of the regulatory landscape, and I think it's important to get a diverse range of views in. So I'll come to that in a bit. But in terms of moving towards a combined mayoral authority, there, what can we learn from somewhere else? So the West Midlands, they've put manufacturing right at the heart of their growth targets, and they're looking to grow 500,000 jobs, with a lot of that in their manufacturing and engineering base. Obviously, they've got a rich history of that, but they're seeing the new economy being driven by reusing brownfield sites to redevelop, and using quite a lot of their devolved mayoral settlement to help do that upfront investment around that and to incentivise new businesses to come into the area. The West Yorkshire Combined Authority is committing to 7 billion over the next 10 years around their corridors of opportunity. And again, they're putting manufacturing and technology at the heart of that, but they're looking at the infrastructure around that. So it's not just about getting businesses to come and set up. They're putting a lot of that money into the transport, the skills, and the site acquisition and redevelopment as well, so that there's sustained growth from those businesses. But we have to be honest down here that the southeast is the knowledge economy base and not necessarily seen as the manufacturing heartland. So we need to think creatively about how we tell the story of what we do have down here, which leads me to bringing in some of our wonderful callers online to have a chat about that. I wondered if Dick, if I could turn to you first as one of the, I think, really exciting manufacturers in Sussex, and you've been kind enough to come on the podcast. and have a chat about that. So people check that out, Dick's interview for a bit more depth. But yeah, tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Boutique Modern and some of your thoughts around, because you've just moved premises as well, and you've been you've been expanding the site you're on. Oh, you're on mute at the moment. There we go.
Hi, Rich. Nice to see you all. I am. Can you hear me? Is everything okay?
It's a little quiet, but I think we can just about, yeah.
All right, good. There's a Hoover in the background, which is probably distracting. Anyway, the Boutique Modern is a modular house builder. Boutique Modern is a house builder, and we build houses in a factory. There's a need for housing, as everyone knows. I have a background in manufacturing, not in construction, and it struck me, looking at the rest of the world, that building houses in a factory was a really good idea in order to reduce carbon, reduce waste massively, improve accuracy, and therefore the performance of the house in use. And to put it glibly, to simply move construction indoors would enable us to fix pricing, fix program, as I say, improve quality and delivery. I needed a big shed to do that in. And in my previous career, I worked in New Haven. New Haven in my neck of the woods is the most affordable industrial per square foot space, partly because it's jammed against the sea. You know what I mean? If you go to Crawley or somewhere like that, which has fantastic access to the rest of the world, you have to pay a little bit more for it. We suffer from 50% of our catchment area being fish, no roads going east or west, everything going north and very slowly. But I was starting a business in a very organic way, and so I had to take space that I could afford. And as Rich says, after 7 years in New Haven, we've now moved to a bigger factory. But I think it's important for me to get over, and I hope this comes over in if you listen to the podcast that I did with Rich earlier. Boutique Modern is, as I say, a house builder. We build houses very much in the same way as any other house builder builds houses, and we're not one of the big five. We're a local house builder. So Boutique Modern, we needed a factory that I estimate currently needs to be capable of about 250 houses a year, maybe rising to as many as 400 or 500 houses a year in the coming years once we get fully operational. And that's what I see our contribution to the housing need in Sussex will be. I'm not looking to build every house in Sussex. I'm not looking to build every house in the southeast from New Haven. I'm looking to build in New Haven housing for East and West Sussex and for Brighton and Hove. The unitary authority arising is a wonderful opportunity I see to sort of pull all that demand together. But I think it's important that a lot of people perceive modular house building as being like the automotive or the aeronautical industries where Boeing build airplanes in one or two places and Ford build cars in one or two places to supply the whole demand. Boutique Modern have ambitions to have more than one factory, but I believe very much that houses are built by people locally, for people locally, with a supply chain that's local. And I think centralizing house building was a bad idea when modular kicked off in sort of modular 1.0, let's say 7, 8, 10 years ago. Having an enormous factory in North Yorkshire is not the way to supply houses in Cornwall, I don't think. So that's a little bit about what we're doing without too much detail on the way we do it. But, we don't go more than 35 miles from the factory anymore. I like my guys to be able to get to site when we're actually delivering the houses within an hour. So we don't go much outside Sussex at all. Our supply chain is all closer than that. Everything comes from probably within about 20 miles at the most. Any sub-component manufacturer is all done very locally as well. And we spend a massive amount of money in New Haven on subcontractors and supply chain. So we're a Sussex business through and through. We're a house builder who builds houses in a factory, but we're not revolutionary, and I don't need any more space right now than I've got at the moment. You know what I mean?
So but in terms of finding that space and and New Haven as a place, where there's a lot of incentive for industry to thrive. What from a kind of regional perspective, or if we have a mayor of Sussex and Brighton that is thinking about, um, you know, where can industry grow? Quick wins, but also long-term investment. How can we build clusters? You talked about your supply chain becoming, very close. Well, that's for some people that's not an option because we don't necessarily have the setup and the infrastructure whereby all of those supply chains can exist near each other. What sort of what's the ask, or what should we have a mayor be cognizant of when they're thinking of, because they're going to be producing a spatial plan within the first year or so where exactly this kind of question is going to come up, and you've got some real lived experience of that.
Um, I mean, I'm not quite sure I understand completely what you're saying. It's what we do is essentially, as I say, we do inside what most people do outside. So
Hmm.
we are calling on a very local supply chain. And I understand that if you're not making houses, if you haven't got Travis Perkins in your supply chain, you do need to go further afield, and you perhaps need to be better connected.
I guess how can it be made easier for people doing quite innovative stuff like yours to go, right, there's space if you need it. There's connectivity if you need it. We can look at where, let's start to identify parts of Sussex where, this stuff can grow and can be really known.
Yeah. What I see as exciting is the demand, not the space. I see enough industrial space. I don't. I don't. I see the mayoral control as being an opportunity to secure a strategy to
Hmm.
house people, and I'm excited by that. You know, perhaps that's not
Yeah.
helpful in this discussion.
Um, so I'm going to bring in another East Sussex. Like I said, I said I'd read a statement from another East Sussex manufacturer, and this is from Matt Knight at Acrovalve, who are based in um, Polegate. Now, fair to say, he's not entirely enthused about more politics, and I'll read a précis of, well, some edited segments of what he sent us. So they make lots of little valves and widgets for heavy industry. He says I use a lot of stainless steel hex bar in the manufacture of my specialist flow control valves. This stainless steel used to be made in the UK, but in nice clean gas-fired furnaces and delivered 300 miles down on all those plants have closed, and now it has to come from India, which is made in old polluting old coal fire furnaces. So we're not joining up the strategy between the raw materials and manufacturers. Um, he's saying his business only survives because it's small and agile, constantly innovating to cut costs because their overheads are being forced up due to government interference and policies. Second generation family business who've been operating for 43 years, but he's not sure if he's going to be able to pass it on to his children. He thinks manufacturing and engineering industries add wealth to the economy, provide good, satisfying, well-paid jobs, but he feels in the UK, but also in Sussex, that people want it gone. He said they've been trying to invest a lot in skills, working with the local sort of education system and local authorities, but have all but given up because they don't feel that manufacturing engineering is really understood in terms of the sort of future focused skills development. And so they're now sending all of their junior employees to a college in Chester, and spending £2,000 a week, sending them 350 miles away in order to get the sort of level of skills that are relevant for their business. So, he goes on to say, Sussex needs to be interested in more than tourism and old people, and I'm not confident that the mayor will have the slightest interest in manufacturing or engineering, and it's just more politicians taking our money, essentially. So I thought useful to air that because whether you agree with him or not, I don't think he's probably alone in feeling that there's not been much of a sort of joined up or optimistic strategy. And that particularly some things about regulation. Now, he's quite anti-net zero regulation. I'm sure others will have other views on that, and we've certainly talked about that being actually a strength in the region. But but is there a sense that, particularly around regulation, a mayor, we've seen it in some other parts of the country, can start to do some more localized levers and pulleys. Now that, they can certainly, is there scope to create some kind of incentives? Um, not so much around tax, although that's starting to come into Greater Manchester and the West Midlands. But, in terms of support, particularly, I wonder if there's something around supporting businesses through new regulatory frameworks and climes that just haven't happened in Sussex because there's not necessarily been that join up. And I wonder, Che, if you had a view on that, as I know Creston Reeve's doing an awful lot around um, ESG and regulatory work and as an accountancy firm. But, do you think we can have a more confident mechanism to support businesses that feel really angry about that?
I'd hope so, as I think everyone else would as well. But I think, at the moment we're seeing a general lethargy to anything that's kind of government and political, etc., and the natural pushback, if you like, of that gentleman that you spoke about just now is probably a widely held view. But actually, we've got to sound a bit more like Dick about his houses and stuff, and look at this as a real opportunity to really focus on what Sussex can be good at. It is a strange county in that it's got a wet bit, as Dick referred to. It's got this protected green bit in the middle, and it's got an airport in the north. And you'll have these big forces from each of those bodies, if you like, trying to be heard. And I think it's really important that us as business people and in manufacturing as well really make sure we are heard, because we can make a difference. And if we could, for instance, going back to employment space, I know here in the Worthing area and on the Sussex coast, it is very squeezed. The options are relatively low. The general quality of employment space across Sussex isn't the best. And to change it, if we could say build clusters of like-minded businesses who could feed off each other, supply each other, etc., then that's the real opportunity, I think, if we can get those things happening and be heard, rather than just one part of a county talking against many other parts of many other counties at central government levels.
Absolutely, yeah, and I'm going to bring in a conversation more specifically around that skills and talent sort of pipeline in a bit, because I think everyone will have something to say on that. So time to think about the micro manufacturers as well as the big growing industrial park ones. Sussex has just joined the Made Smarter program, and so has already identified 200 odd manufacturing SMEs to support with digital technology and automation. And we know that of the 3,000 manufacturers, 98% of them are very small, and are part of supply chains quite often, rather than the big sort of full manufacturing plants. But something that does feel very Sussex is the sort of entrepreneurship around produce and provenance, food and drink. And actually, we kind of really punch above our weight in terms of microbreweries, craft distilleries, cheesemakers. And obviously our vineyards, which are now becoming internationally known and moving from sort of tiny cottage industries to pretty serious manufacturers with quite big exporting contracts. The Sussex Six campaign has been successful, supported by Gatwick and local tourism boards around supporting small batch producers to think a bit bigger about audience and marketing and exports, etc. But like with everywhere, there are some clear skills gaps here, and it relies a lot on founders, doing a huge amount of all the different work themselves and not necessarily having the infrastructure to grow. Um, and we know that Brexit and tariff wars, whilst maybe feel like they're over there, have really impacted a lot of small businesses and their ability to sell internationally, and arguably that's not had the support or the attention that it could have done. So I really want to bring in Dr. Thomas Martin Wells, who is one of those small batch artisan distillers doing incredible work, and opened this call saying he might need to pop off and check his pots because he's doing some live manufacturing as we
I
speak.
think we've
So,
got a good 15-20 minutes before I have to
okay,
do
well,
that. So
Tom, tell us a little about your work and and you are Sussex born and bred as well, and what took you into manufacturing?
yeah, sure. Gosh, I mean, it's a long story if I go right back to the beginning. So I'll try and keep it to sort of the cliff notes, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, I used to be an academic. I was in chemistry for sort of 10 years or so. It took me out of Sussex for a little while, but I returned as it's it's an area I love to be. My family are all here, and yeah, I think we're a bit of a family of small micro makers. Really, it's a sort of bit of a microcosm, I think, of perhaps what Sussex is actually rather good at, which is sort of problem solvers and creatives and things. And I think what we perhaps lack is the ability to market what we do well. I think that's definitely something I've noticed. I mean, I started Slake in my garage on Shoreham Beach nearly a decade ago now. And with a very small loan from the Prince's Trust or the King's Trust, as it now is, and yeah, I think after a few years, we were clear that we needed to find something a bit more suitable to move into. But it was incredibly challenging as a journey. So I mean, we've sort of alluded to that a little bit. But yeah, finding suitable premises for something like a distillery, which, to be honest, at that point in time, most councils probably hadn't had a planning application for a distillery across their desks for goodness knows how long. So they didn't really know how to deal with it. So there was a lot of sort of ground to break and sort of educating various people in various places to kind of make that happen. And I think, yeah, along the way we used a lot of, for example, produce markets, local farmers markets, and things to kind of get some sales, but also marketing. Word of mouth that's built through that. Still very much, I think, as Dick said, a very organic journey to the growth of our business. But yeah, it's sort of, we have managed to find, we sort of bought a small industrial unit in Worthing during COVID, actually. Which then was quite a long renovation project. But, for example, just some of the challenges along the way, sui generis use cases of premises, having to then prove that, what we were doing wouldn't create sort of smell or noise and all this sort of thing, and just kind of, going through that for perhaps the South Downs National Park, which we did for one premises that we were looking at. That's a slightly different planning authority and regimen compared to Worthing and Ada and etc. etc. So some multiple pre-planning applications. I mean, ours is slightly complex because of the HMRC involvement and things that adds an extra layer to the the compliance and the uncertainty with a premises move, for example, because this is essentially why we ended up having to go to the bank and buy a premises rather than rent one, because every time we would find something suitable and we'd say, we'll have it, subject to getting our approval. You can't make HMRC move any quicker, and it could take 6+ months before that would come through without any guarantee that it necessarily would come through. And by the time that happened, we would have lost that premises to something else. So, that happened several times, and, that's kind of why we ended up where we did. I mean, the plus side is it allowed us to really invest in a sort of long-term view as to what we wanted to create, and really perhaps to understand what the brand was about. And I think, I think the chap that you read the statement out, yes, it's not just about tourism, but I think tourism is going to be a sort of inevitable area of our economy in Sussex that is going to continue to grow. Almost serendipitously, the more visitors we have, the more people realise it's a rather wonderful place to visit and live and work. And I think we need to, be aware of perhaps areas where this has happened and it may have sort of disenfranchised or sort of perhaps not disenfranchised, but displaced local people in terms of the quality work and things they could do. Perhaps Cornwall's quite a good example of an area where perhaps this can cause tensions and problems. But I think jobs like manufacturing are actually those higher paying jobs that are really critical to being able to support local workers in well-paid jobs that are going to not be priced out of owning homes and all those sorts of things in the area when it becomes perhaps more visible. And I think that is with the vineyards and the sort of sort of eco-tourism, but also this sort of food and drink tourism. Because, we do have, obviously, with the Living Coast and the sort of, these high-profile tourist hotspots, Seven Sisters and these sorts of areas, some of them are quite fragile areas that we don't want everybody visiting all at once. And I think, actually, the food and drink particularly is a really good way of spreading these visitors out across Sussex and making sure that tourism is more sustainable. So I think, there's an awful lot of things to consider. But I've already mentioned marketing as being sort of one aspect that I think is difficult for small businesses. But I suppose the other thing is very much also distribution. It's how we get our products to customers. And I think at a smaller scale, one of the things that often makes the most sense is to sell direct to customers. So that, that's something we've always done through our website, but also obviously at those local farmers markets and things that we were talking about. But it's, there are no economies of scale to be had if there are lots of small businesses doing this in isolation. And the truth is, through some of these markets and these, we've dabbled with various solutions to this over the years. Things like the Sussex Taste Collective, which was really a sort of it never really got off the ground because a lot of small producers are very busy people, and it's quite hard to find the time to essentially invest in perhaps creating a cooperative or something that would actually work for all the members. But I think that's the sort of solution that we need, because if we could perhaps figure out how to, whether it's producers' own premises, allowing collection of other products from a network, for example, that would kind of help us distribute our goods and services across Sussex. But also it's that kind of united voice. If there is a sort of trade show or something like this going on that they may be multiple £1,000s per square metre in some of these larger shows. So for a small producer, that's a hell of an investment. But if you're in part of a collective of Sussex producers, for example, that can kind of take a footprint there and raise the profile of all Sussex produced products, there's lots of economies of scale through some sort of like a marketing and distribution cooperative that I can imagine really bearing a lot of fruit for the growth, and sort of also just providing almost a runway for perhaps where a small producer or a maker, is starting off a business, might be in the garage, it might be at a local farmer's market. Where do they go? The truth is that route is very, very difficult. So I think, we could do a lot more. And I can imagine a sort of, a top-down approach, perhaps from a mayoral authority, to think about how these things join together could be very beneficial to, essentially speeding up the rate of almost, not, I wouldn't say failure, but like, a lot of small businesses don't last. But we need people to go through this process more rapidly and find out what is working and be able to scale those things that do work. And there are so many hurdles in the way of that. I can tell you locally that, it's amazing that we have, I think the people that make it, they really tough stuff, but it's, just sort of,
well, just got to jump in there, because I think that's a really good point around that shared learning. We've got incubators for sort of tech, and we're starting to create lots of specialist knowledge around, green energy and, the kind of hydrogen collectors, things like that. Does feel that that could be a real quick win for a new mayor, is actually say, well, let's create a real knowledge and scalability kind of blueprint for Sussex producers, and we could learn from what the East Midlands have done. All around Leicestershire, Stilton, Melton Mowbray. They've still got that real sort of heritage connection for tourism, but actually
Mm.
they're producing at scale. That's
100%. I mean, I think that's also what, tourism, what it really is a route to a wider market. It's a route to export. It's so you've got to think of the fact is we have attention. We are very close to London, and what this has meant, not just this, but just in general, the dominance of supermarkets, particularly, it has led to a sort of a loss of regionality. And it's felt quite keenly, I think, in Sussex. And I think there's very much a pushback. I mean, one of the reasons all these small sort of cheese makers and things exist is it is about, in part, it's rediscovering and surfacing some of our old culture and heritage through food and drink. Obviously, these things are very linked. But there is also a real, I think it's just that problem solving mindset in Sussex. There's a sort of, we won't be druv. We like to figure out our own way of doing things. And I think that is very rife in the food and drink industry. There's people kind of bringing new spins. And it's also a massive advantage we have. I mean, if you look at sort of, the wine industry is a great example of this. You look in Champagne and you think, this is tradition over many years that have really locked in to a very specific circumstance of what they can market, what these products are. In Sussex, we are dipping our toes into things like PDOs and controlling some of this stuff, but we have a lot more scope to, be innovative in these spaces and create our own sort of modern touch. So I think, hubs that might help with marketing, but even food science, modern food science,
That's going to lead
but
me
without
to my third.
losing regionality and heritage as well.
It'll lead me to my third area. Sorry to cut you off. I'm just conscious of time, and I
We
want
could
to
talk
make
about it
sure.
all day, so it's probably important that you do.
And we have and we will again, and I love it. But I want to make sure we cover everything. Just there's a note from Vicky King from Plus Counting. Actually, she can't go on camera because she's juggling children and dogs. But she's just said some great insights and ideas from Tom there. An opportunity for collaboration between producers, manufacturers, hospitality, tourism, and space. If we're able to connect these conversations and share these possible partnerships, there's a power to really punch above our weight. And as
Yeah.
accountants, and I'm like I said, really delighted at how firms like Creston Reeves and Plus Counting are part of this conversation so early. We're in a prime opportunity to share client stories far and wide, and look at how to do this more and louder within our communities in Sussex. Markets are starting to pop up more. There's a new one in Preston Park in Brighton. People want local, fresh, a chance to speak to who they're buying from. But to be able to scale that up and make that a living is really key. So in terms of what other areas have done around particularly small and micro manufacturing innovation. Not so much. I haven't got so many stories about the kind of food and drink, but around this kind of innovation hubs. Around being able to invest in research and I think there is a lot around the kind of the science and technology of food here. South Yorkshire have created HE-led R&D centres to assist small manufacturers in their all that problem solving you were talking about, Tom. Liverpool City region have got new funding streams for SME manufacturers, a 10 million seed fund to back early stage companies with high growth potential. So I think it's about that joined up approach to that early support being deliberate and kind of sector focused. So thinking about that innovation story a bit more, and I want to think about that in through the lens of skills as well. Sussex is positioning itself, emerging green industries, like I said, the Hydrogen Sussex partnership that Shaw and Port a big part behind. Is trying to look at the manufacturing engineering of the future. We do have some niche R&D strengths in Sussex. Medical devices. We have a lot of medical manufacturing. Pharmaceutical, high precision engineering, and quantum is obviously becoming a really big part in Haywards Heath. But these are not necessarily innovation networks yet. They're not sort of hubs and clusters yet. It's all happening sort of a bit here, a bit there. And so the opportunity to link firms and universities up and to create innovation clusters, I think, is really important. And we can see that's happened in a lot of other places as well. Building on what I was talking about, but a lot around skills and the workforce. And I think that's coming up time and time again as like, we can invest in all of this capacity, but if we don't have the talent coming through, we're going to get stuck. So I want to bring in Mel Butcher. I'm putting you on the spot, Mel. I know we teed you up for this, but Mel's been doing a lot of
That's
work on the
fine.
local skills improvement plan, and so spent a lot of time talking to employers. And I think you've been talking to you've been doing the STEM stuff, haven't you? So you've been talking to science, technology, engineering manufacturers. And I've known Mel for a long time, and she's been working in the skills and sort of post-16 vocational sector. So what have you learned talking to those employers, and what's the sort of insights that's come through the local skills improvement plan around manufacturing, engineering, and where, as a whole county, as a whole region of Sussex, we need to be thinking about how to make it far easier for this talent to come through?
I think there's a couple of things there. I think is one of the main things is that the manufacturers across the county are different. So when it comes to skills and training, one size doesn't fit all. So therefore, we have to kind of look at those clusters, which we've talked about before, about how we can actually route skills and training in those clusters for that training to actually work. So your comment from Matt at Acro Valve, I've heard before because I know Matt, and that is the key issue when it comes to skills and workforce and the training. There is a declining workforce, particularly in manufacturing. A lot of the businesses, particularly those small businesses, they've got their leaders and their business owners are retirement age or past retirement age, and therefore they don't necessarily have people to hand on to their business to. So that's a key issue with the kind of aging population. There are recruitment difficulties around skills at all levels, really. So there are the general manufacturing operation kind of skills, but then you've got your high-end automation, robotics, that type of skills which are needed. There's a growing trend into obviously artificial intelligence, digitalization, smart manufacturing skills. One of the issues, because of the machinery used in manufacturing, it's difficult to actually put on training. So you can do the front end with regards to the health and safety and, safe working practices and how generally machines work and a bit of coding, but actually in the use of making those things using machinery, a car, Rolls-Royce, the machinery they use at Rolls-Royce will be very different to making a valve for, I don't know, a robot or something else in another firm. So I think that is the struggle we have around that. There are some innovations going on. So there is a research programme which the University of Sussex is running, which is to do with the kind of innovations and automation into manufacturing. And there are some little clusters which are popping up. So 1066 manufacturing in the Hastings and Rother area. They're doing a lot of work with regarding talent. So doing a lot of work really from primary age to getting people knowing about STEM, right the way up to kind of apprenticeships and upskilling their own workforce. But there is also that perception of manufacturing, which is key. I think, I don't, employers tell me, and also education, training providers tell me that the perception, particularly for young people, is that manufacturing and engineering is a dirty environment to work in. And actually, a lot of firms, you go into their facilities and their factories, and they're probably the most cleanest place you could ever be in your life. So, I mean, it's a very different. So there is quite a lot of work, and we've started that work about changing perceptions.
Yeah.
And also joining up that activity between the training providers, education, with the employers, so the training meets more what employers require.
Yeah, and I think yeah, it's spot on. Thank you for that. And I think, recognizing, yes, some skills in manufacturing are less transferable than others when it's very, very technical, and that's to be acknowledged. But still, some of the entry points, are not and are shared. And actually, a lot
Yeah.
of the initiatives are very, very localized. East Sussex, West Sussex, Brighton, Hove have traditionally done their very different ways to look at this. Brighton hasn't really talked about manufacturing because it doesn't have a huge number of manufacturers. So there can be a more joined up thing. And I've had the privilege of being visiting both Dick and Tom's factories, and I tell you, they're definitely cleaner than my house in many ways. Dick, I want to bring you in. I'm conscious of, we've got a few minutes left, but you've talked about some kind of centre of excellence or innovation, or using the learning that you're doing and the work you're doing to to kind of share that learning and to think about a future workforce that's thinking about manufacturing differently.
Yeah, but this is something I feel quite passionately about. Actually, the industry that I'm in is very traditional. It's very stuck in its ways. It's also dominated by some massively well-established people who do things in what we call the legacy construction industry, but basically the traditional construction industry, which dominates that. I need to let more people know about off-site construction, factory house building. And so we are establishing slowly, but we are establishing a centre of excellence in New Haven with a sort of very small lecture theatre facility which overlooks the factory space. And we've laid the factory out, well, to be viewed from there, almost like a supermarket. So you can sort of see where the floor cassettes are being made and where the windows are fitted and stuff like that, so that I can get people together there, whether it's, and this is Rich, this is the important thing, I think, whether it's local councillors or whether it's primary school children or whether it's people who are employers agents, members of RICS, or architects, members of REBA, or architectural technologists from the University of Brighton, or product designers from the University of Brighton, all these different people, and sit them down and talk to them about what we're doing, what we're trying to do. And I think it's something that Mel said, I think is very right, and also Tom said, that the perception of manufacturing in most kids' experience is messy. It is often dangerous as well. I think a lot of people perceive manufacturing as being relatively dangerous, and also sort of a bit cold. And where am I going to have my lunch? And is the loo going to be clean? And will it work? And all those things. That's the perception of manufacturing, I think, among the coming generation. And Boutique Modern is working very hard. We're also a B Corp, Jay, the same as you guys are. And one of the reasons why we got involved in the B Corp qualification and registering it is because I think if you're going to say to people, we're this and we're that and we're the other, you need to be able to say, and we can prove it because of X. And that might be an ISO qualification. It might be some academic qualification, of course. But B Corp is great because it kind of sums the whole thing up, and they really seriously don't let you get away with it. Whereas with some things you can say, oh yeah, fine, yeah, we do that. But with B Corp, they come in at you in so many different ways, and they audit every detail of what you do, who you work with, what you do following the particular project that you're on. But we've sort of embraced B Corp, and we almost sort of base the whole business around the accountability of the B Corp registration. And yes, the centre of excellence, Rich, is based on that. I want people to come in and see that we've got designers. We have a team of technologists, we have a team of technical construction designers, we have a commercial department, a construction department, and quality control, and all the other things, health and safety, and all of those human resources, all those other jobs that come within a manufacturing business, which aren't, they're actually quite cozy and comfortable, and there's free coffee, and it's a nice place to be.
It's extraordinary. Yeah, I mean, it's a real, I realize how lucky I am just through my work and lots of curiosity and working with lots of different people. I've been in the Rolls-Royce factory. I've spent time in the advanced, engineering facility at the University of Brighton. I've been to Marshall Tuflex in Hastings and walked around, their kind of plastic molding. But I'm acutely aware at how many other people don't get to do that, and certainly how many young people don't get to do that. And although there are kind of open door schemes and so on, something that was much more coordinated. I mean, I think that it's for all ages, isn't it? Just to be able to open out these spaces for people to be able to experience how stuff's made, connect back to materials and the science of it. Yeah, I mean, I've spent the last 2 years running a festival in Essex, of all places, in the heart of a tractor factory. The New Holland Tractor Factory in Basildon is the most amazing place. And so I've been able to take hundreds of school kids through because they just go, let's design something. So a whole day, and we bring in external people, doing VR and XR and drone flights, and we can build a whole festival in a factory for all the local school children. Nothing like that has happened in Sussex yet. So maybe here's an open invitation to certainly to any manufacturer, but also to the mayor as a kind of there's some quick wins there that really open up these opportunities. But to have something where you're going to a car factory, Thomas's distillery, boutique modern. What a day! What a couple of days out that would be for so many people.
I agree. I think it would be a real eye opener, because Thomas's world is it's so varied. The food and drink, micro industry in Sussex is so varied and so exciting and so specialist that it's got to inspire people to want to get involved.
Absolutely. I think there's also another sort of aspect that perhaps, with the devolution and all this sort of stuff, I think one of the things that's going under the radar is we need to understand what is Sussex, what's it mean to be here, what is it that unites us all together and things. And I do think that making things, if we break manufacturing down to its, is such a big part of that. It's a source of pride, great immense pride of place. Especially when you're making things in such a way because of where you make it, and that's very much about the people.
100%.
So it goes hand in hand, and I think that is that is something that if you think of the brand Sussex, if you will, that the mayor, if that's where we're going, is they're going to be the custodian of that in a way that we have not had before. So I think it's very important that they connect it through to the visibility of what is made in Sussex. I mean, we've talked about this, the Sussex 6 campaign. That's something that was going around. How do we verify things that are made in Sussex? But, I think throwing the doors open and getting people in and seeing what is going on behind the doors of these industrial units and stuff like that is a very wonderful thing that can only, empower people to feel part of, where they live. And,
Amen to that. And I think other places have learnt from that. And Basildon, for example, where I've done all this work, it's because it's a town built around the factories. So that story is very ingrained. But we do have towns in Sussex built around food and fishing, and then the land, and then making, and we don't tell that story. So thank you all so much. We're at time now. So I won't advertise you coming along to the Manufacturing Devolution Growth Story Roundtable because it's just finished. So I don't know why that slide's there, but it does have the website at the bottom, sussexandthecity.info. Lots of resources, lots of great interviews, and past roundtables as well. This is just the start of this conversation. We're going into the next phase to really work with all of our partners to create new bits of research, new data sets, mapping the area, really helping people to feel, to kind of show some of this stuff that we've been talking about, so that whoever becomes mayor, it's really, really easy for them to kind of pick up and run with it. So thank you so much to my guests today. You've been fantastic. Thank you so much to Letitia for putting it all together, and thank you very much to Creston Reeves and to Che for being our headline partner today as well.
Thank you, Richard.